The golden light of Ra cascaded through alabaster columns as nobles gathered for the pharaoh's selection ceremony. Lady Nefertari stood tall among them, her kohl-rimmed eyes surveying inferior competitors with practiced disdain. Her lineage was impeccable, her beauty unrivaled throughout the two lands. When the moment came, she stepped forward boldly, jewels glinting against bronzed skin. "Please choose me, I am the best," she proclaimed, voice carrying across the hushed chamber. The pharaoh's gaze, however, drifted past her to rest upon Asenath, plump, plain-faced, standing quietly in shadow. His finger pointed decisively. Her gasps rippled through the assembly. Nefertari retreated to her chambers, slaves scattering before her fury like birds before a storm. The bronze mirror of Ishtar, a gift from her father upon her 16th summer, reflected a face contorted with rage and humiliation. She hurled a cosmetic jar against the wall, ochre powder exploding like blood across alabaster. "How dare he? How dare he choose that cow over me?" She paced, jewels jangling with each furious step. "I am the daughter of Asenath, keeper of the royal seal. My mother's beauty was celebrated in song. I have been groomed since birth for the royal court." Her handmaiden Kebi kept her eyes downcast. Perhaps the pharaoh saw something beyond. Beyond what? "Look at me." Nefertari gestured to her reflection. Perfect almond eyes, high cheekbones, lips full and symmetrical. Her body was slender yet curved in all places men desired. And look at her, round as a hippopotamus, plain as clay. Across the palace, Asenath sat alone, trembling. The pharaoh's choice had thrust her from shadows into blinding light. Born to Sinib, a humble court scribe who had taught her to read and calculate when other girls learned only to please men with beauty and silence. Her mother had died birthing her, leaving Asenath with only her father's love, as armor against a world that judged women by their appearance. "You must have bewitched him," sneered a passing noble's daughter. "What herbs did you slip into his wine, fat one?" Asenath closed her eyes, remembering her father's words. "Your mind is sharper than any beauty's smile. Your heart holds more wisdom than 1,000 scrolls." In his private chamber, Pharaoh Amenhotep dismissed his advisors with a wave. "Enough, my decision stands." Vizier Imhotep lingered. "Great one, forgive my impertinence, but Lady Nefertari brings connections to the southern provinces. Her father controls. I am well aware of her lineage, Imhotep. I seek a woman of substance, not merely a political alliance or a pretty face to warm my bed. And you believe this? Asenath has substance." The pharaoh smiled. "I have watched her these past months. While Nefertari preened and plotted, Asenath brought food to the scribe who collapsed from heat. While Nefertari complained about the temple dancers' imperfections, Asenath quietly corrected an error in the grain accounting that saved us from significant loss. She believes no one notices her. That is her strength." Nefertari, meanwhile, summoned her closest allies, Meritane, daughter of the high priest, and Kamwaset, a courtier whose ambitions matched her own. "This insult cannot stand," Nefertari declared, stroking the golden frame of her mirror. "My father arrives within a fortnight. Until then, we must ensure this Asenath reveals her true inadequacy." Meritane smiled thinly. "I have already begun inquiries into her background. Every woman has secrets, and every secret is a weapon," Kamwaset added. In the right hands, that night, as the palace slept, Asenath stood on her modest balcony, gazing at stars scattered like grain across Not's dark body. A servant girl appeared with water. "Thank you, Tani," Asenath said, using the child's name when most nobles wouldn't bother to learn it. "The other ladies are angry," Mistress Tani whispered. "They say terrible things." Asenath sighed. "I never sought this attention. I came to court only because my father wished me to use my mind in service to Egypt." "The pharaoh sees with the eyes of the gods," Tani offered, before disappearing into shadows. Alone again, Asenath whispered a prayer to Isis, goddess of wisdom. Grant me strength to bear this burden. I am not beautiful or noble born. I have only my mind and heart to offer Egypt. Unknown to her, the pharaoh watched from a shadowed alcove, his heart warming at her humble prayer. While Nefertari plotted revenge and court alliances shifted like sand, Amenhotep silently reaffirmed his choice. Beauty fades, but wisdom endures, and Egypt needed endurance more than ever before. Pharaoh Amenhotep unrolled the dream papyrus by lamplight, his fingers tracing hieroglyphs inscribed by the temple dream interpreters. For 3 consecutive nights, the same vision had visited him, a lion with a jeweled coat, dying of thirst, beside a plain clay vessel, filled with life-giving water. "Your Majesty requires rest," murmured his body servant, an elderly man who had served 3 pharaohs. "The gods do not send such dreams 3 times without purpose." Nebamon. When dawn painted the eastern sky, Amenhotep summoned Pahotep, eldest of the dream priests. The wizened man bowed, forehead touching the floor. "Rise, old friend," said the pharaoh. "Speak freely about my dreams." Pahotep's voice rasped like papyrus. "The meaning seems clear, divine one. You are surrounded by beauty that lacks substance. The jeweled lion, magnificent, proud, yet dying for want of what truly sustains life. And the clay vessel, humble in appearance, yet containing what is truly precious." The priest hesitated. "If I may be so bold, this pertains to your search for a queen." Amenhotep nodded slowly. 4 months had passed since his beloved wife Ti had succumbed to fever, leaving him alone with the burden of 2 lands. Court protocol demanded a new royal consort be chosen before the next inundation. "The women presented to me are like painted birds," Ptahhotep, bright plumage hiding empty hearts. "They speak of trivial matters and scheme for position. Not all, perhaps," said the priest carefully. The pharaoh's mind drifted to the first time he had noticed Asenath. He had been disguised as a common scribe, a practice he occasionally employed to observe his court unfiltered by ceremony. A calculation error had been discovered in the grain storage records, a ichi that could have led to significant losses. While nobles blamed servants and servants trembled in fear, a plain woman in simple linen had quietly recalculated the figures, finding the error and correcting it before presenting her findings to the overseer with neither pride nor expectation of reward. Later he discovered she was Asenath, daughter of Sanab the scribe. He had watched her from afar since that day, noting her kindness to servants, her quiet intelligence, her complete lack of artifice or ambition. "I have observed Asenath for Forbes," Amenhotep admitted. "She possesses wisdom rare in one so young. Yet she is not beautiful in the traditional sense," Ptahhotep noted. "Beauty is common in my court. Wisdom and compassion are not. The people expect a queen of legendary beauty, divine one. It is tradition." Amenhotep gazed at the great hall beyond his chambers, where courtiers already gathered. "Perhaps it is time for new traditions. Egypt faces drought, Hittite threats from the north, and internal corruption. I need more than a decorative consort." In the weeks before the selection ceremony, he had tested both women subtly. When a servant spilled wine near Nefertari, she had the girl whipped. When another made the same mistake near Asenath, she helped clean the mess and privately gave the frightened girl a copper ring to replace wages that would be docked. When tax records were discussed in court, Nefertari's eyes glazed with boredom. Asenath, though silent, followed every calculation with keen interest. He had accidentally dropped a complex papyrus near her later, watching as she not only understood the contents, but quietly corrected a mathematical error before returning it. "You realize your choice will create enemies," warned Ptahhotep. "I am Pharaoh. I embody divine will," Amenhotep replied, though uncertainty flickered briefly across his face. "Those who oppose my choice oppose the gods themselves." The old priest bowed again. May Thoth grant you wisdom, divine one. After Ptah-hotep departed, Amenhotep called for his ceremonial regalia. Today he would shock his court and perhaps change Egypt's future. Nefertari would be furious. Her father was a powerful ally whose support Amenhotep needed against the Hittite threat. Yet as he lifted the heavy double crown onto his head, the dream images returned. The beautiful, dying lion and the plain vessel of life-giving water. Sometimes he murmured to himself, a pharaoh must choose what Egypt needs, not what Egypt expects. A week after the selection ceremony, whispers slithered through the palace corridors like serpents. Nefertari had secluded herself for 3 days, emerging with a smile as false as a wooden mask and twice as rigid. You seem recovered, my friend, observed Miritam as they walked through the lotus gardens. One does not recover from such insult, Nefertari replied, her voice low. One plans. That morning she had received her father's response to her urgent message. Lord Amenemhat would arrive within 10 days, bringing with him the influence of the southern provinces and a formidable military reputation. Until then, she would not sit idle. The pharaoh visits the Fat One's chambers daily, Kamwaset reported, joining the women beneath a sycamore's shade. For conversation only, according to my sources. Nefertari's laugh was brittle. Conversation with that creature about what the proper amount of honey cakes to consume before noon. She reads. Meritaten said reluctantly. Her father was a scribe who educated her alongside his male apprentices, most inappropriate. So our rival is learned. This changes nothing. Nefertari plucked a lotus blossom, crushing it slowly in her palm. Even the cleverest woman can be undone by suspicion. In his private audience chamber, Vizier Imhotep presented the day's administrative matters to Pharaoh Amenhotep. The high priest requests additional grain for the temple of Amun. Imhotep stated, avoiding the subject both men knew dominated his thoughts. The pharaoh signed the authorization. You disapprove of my choice, old friend. Imhotep hesitated. It is not my place to approve or disapprove, divine one. Yet disapproval radiates from you like heat from the sun. The vizier set aside the scroll. Your father taught me that a pharaoh's personal wishes must sometimes bow to political necessity. Lord Amenemhat controls 1/3 of your army. His daughter's elevation would have secured his loyalty through blood ties. I will secure his loyalty through reason and mutual benefit. Amenhotep replied, and I will have a queen whose mind serves Egypt, not merely her own ambition. The court sees only that you have chosen a commoner with no family connections, and forgive me, uncommon girth. Then the court is blind to what truly matters. Meanwhile, Asenath arranged her few possessions in the queen's chambers, quarters far too grand for a scribe's daughter. Servants watched her with barely concealed curiosity. Mistress, the royal seamstresses await your measurements, announced the steward, his expression carefully neutral. Asenath flushed. Yes, of course. After the uncomfortable measuring session, where the seamstresses exchanged knowing glances at her ample proportions, Asenath retreated to a small alcove with a view of the sacred lake. A young servant girl appeared with refreshments. Thank you, Asenath said, noticing the girl's bruised wrist. What happened to your arm, child? The girl, Tani from the previous night, looked startled at being addressed so directly. It's nothing, mistress. It's clearly something. Please sit a moment. Reluctantly, Tani perched on the edge of a stool. I was slow bringing Lady Nefertari's morning cosmetics. Her handmaiden Kebi struck me. Asenath examined the bruise. I have an ointment that will help. My father taught me simple healing. As she gently applied the balm, neither woman noticed the pharaoh observing from the colonnade. His heart warmed at her kindness, so different from the casual cruelty common among the nobility. Later that evening, as Asenath prepared for sleep, her new handmaiden discovered a small alabaster vial tucked among her clothing. What strange markings, the woman said, holding up the container. Asenath frowned. That isn't mine. The handmaiden removed the stopper, sniffing cautiously. Poison, she whispered, dropping the vial as if it burned her fingers. Black lotus and scorpion venom. Who would? Asenath began. Then understanding dawned. The Pharaoh must be told. No, the handmaiden's eyes widened with fear. If this is part of a plot, informing the Pharaoh ensures you'll be blamed. They'll say you planned to poison him yourself. But I'm innocent. Innocence is no protection against clever enemies, mistress. The woman gathered the broken vial carefully. We must dispose of this and say nothing until we know who placed it here. As palace torches were extinguished one by one, 3 figures met in a shadowed garden alcove. Is it done? Nefertari asked. Meritata nodded. The vial has been planted. Now we wait for a servant to discover it. And when they do, Chemoset added, the fat scribe's daughter will find herself not in the royal bed, but in the royal prison. Nefertari gazed up at the stars. My father arrives in 9 days. By then I'll be the only choice remaining. 3 days after the poison vial incident, Vizier Imhotep approached the pharaoh's throne with measured steps. Divine One, a dispute has arisen in the marketplace that requires royal judgment, he announced, satisfaction glinting in his eyes. Perhaps it presents an opportunity to demonstrate your new favorite's wisdom to the court. Imhotep studied his vizier's face. You suggest a public test, merely a chance for Lady Asenath to prove her worth, Imhotep replied smoothly, and perhaps for Lady Nefertari to show what the pharaoh might be missing. The pharaoh drummed his fingers on the golden arm of his throne. Very well. Summon both women and prepare the hall of judgment. We shall see whose wisdom better serves Egypt. Word spread quickly. By midday, the great hall brimmed with courtiers eager to witness the contest. The golden scales of Ma'at, symbol of truth and justice, stood beside the pharaoh's judgment seat, their empty balance pans awaiting the weight of competing arguments. Nefertari entered like a goddess incarnate, her linen gown clinging to every perfect curve, jewels adorning her throat and wrists. She knelt gracefully before the pharaoh, rising with practiced elegance. Asenath followed moments later, her simpler attire and fuller figure, drawing whispers and smirks. She bowed deeply, her movements earnest if less polished. A dispute between merchants requires judgment, Amenhotep announced. I would hear wisdom from both of you before rendering my decision. 2 men were brought forward, one elderly and prosperous, the other young and clearly distressed. Great Pharaoh, the elder merchant began, I sold this young fool 20 rolls of fine linen. He agreed to pay upon delivery, but now claims the goods were damaged and refuses payment. I demand full compensation plus interest for the delay. The younger merchant prostrated himself. Divine One, I contracted for perfect goods. What arrived was stained with water damage. I offered partial payment, but he demands full price for damaged merchandise. Imhotep gestured to Nefertari. Lady Nefertari, how would you resolve this matter? She stepped forward confidently. The law is clear. A verbal contract is binding before the gods. If 20 rolls were promised and delivered, payment must be made in full. The young merchant should have inspected the goods before accepting delivery. She turned to the pharaoh. Justice demands full payment with interest for delayed settlement, as the elder merchant requests. Murmurs of approval rippled through the court. Her judgment aligned perfectly with traditional Egyptian commercial law. Lady Asenath, Imhotep said, poorly concealing his skepticism. Your thoughts? Asenath approached the scales slowly. May I examine the disputed linen? A servant brought forward a sample roll. Asenath studied it carefully, then addressed both merchants. When was the agreement made? She asked the elder merchant. 2 months ago, during the last full moon. She turned to the younger man. And when was it delivered? 3 weeks later, after the unexpected rains. Asenath nodded thoughtfully. The water damage occurred after the agreement, but before delivery. Neither merchant mentioned weather conditions in their contract. She faced the Pharaoh. Divine One, strict application of law would indeed demand full payment. However, wisdom suggests a different approach. The court held its breath as she continued. The elder merchant's storehouse is near the river. I recognize his seal from the dockside district. The unexpected rains 3 weeks after their agreement would have affected his goods. He knew or should have known the linen was damaged, yet delivered it without disclosure. She placed a hand on each side of the scales. I propose the young merchant pay 3/4 of the agreed price, acknowledging the binding nature of their agreement, while accounting for the reduced value of the goods. Furthermore, this case reveals the need for better written contracts, specifying inspection conditions and responsibilities during unexpected events. Silence fell across the hall. The elder merchant's face darkened while the younger looked cautiously hopeful. Amenhotep leaned forward. An interesting solution, not merely addressing the case before us, but suggesting improvements to prevent future disputes. He turned to the merchants. Do you find this judgment acceptable? Both men, sensing the Pharaoh's approval, bowed in agreement. Nefertari's perfect features remained composed, though her knuckles whitened around her fan. The court's reaction was mixed, some impressed by Asenath's practical wisdom, others disapproving of her departure from strict legal tradition. As the merchants were dismissed, Imhotep whispered to the Pharaoh, "The girl shows unexpected cleverness, but many nobles find her approach too accommodating. A ruler must be firm. A ruler must be wise." Imhotep corrected, "Sometimes wisdom lies in firmness, sometimes in flexibility." From the shadows, Nefertari watched the Pharaoh's approving glance toward Asenath. Her initial plan had failed, but this public display revealed something valuable. Asenath's thinking challenged tradition, and in Egypt, challenging tradition was dangerous ground indeed. In the quiet of early morning before the palace stirred to life, Asenath sat cross-legged on her chamber floor, a clay tablet balanced on her lap. Her stylus moved confidently across the smooth surface, recording observations and reflections, a habit formed in childhood. "My father always said knowledge preserved is wisdom gained," she murmured to herself, carefully inscribing hieratic script. Unlike the formal hieroglyphs adorning temple walls, this flowing script allowed her thoughts to race ahead, unimpeded. She paused, touching the simple clay amulet at her throat, her father's parting gift when she'd been summoned to court. Seneb had been more than just her father. He had been her teacher, mentor, and sole defender in a world that valued women primarily for beauty and breeding potential. "You were right, father," she whispered. "Knowledge is power, even when hidden." Her earliest memories were of sitting beside him in his small scribal office, watching in fascination as he transformed spoken words into marks on papyrus. By age 5, she could write her name. By 7, she could calculate grain stores and tax assessments. By 12, she had secretly read most of the scrolls in the House of Life, medical treatises, astronomical observations, and religious texts normally forbidden to women. "What are you writing, mistress?" asked Tani, entering with fresh water. Asenath smiled. "Just thoughts. My father taught me that writing clarifies thinking. You miss him?" "It wasn't a question. Every day. He died last year, a fever that came suddenly. Before that he made sure I was placed in the palace administration, though women rarely serve as scribes." "Is that how the Pharaoh noticed you?" Asenath shook her head. "I don't know why he chose me. I'm not beautiful like Lady Nefertari, nor politically connected." Tani set down the water pitcher. "May I speak free, mistress?" "Always." "The servants talk. They say you corrected a major error in the grain accounts that would have caused winter shortages. They say you helped the royal physician diagnose the treasurer's illness when all others were baffled. Small things noticed by those who matter." Asenath looked down at her tablet. "I never sought attention. I only wanted to use what my father taught me." A knock interrupted them. Tani opened the door to find a royal messenger. "The Divine One requests Lady Asenath's presence in the royal gardens." The messenger announced, Heart pounding, Asenath quickly put away her tablet and followed. The palace gardens were empty save for the pharaoh, who stood contemplating a lotus pool. "You requested me, divine one?" she asked, bowing deeply. "Amenhotep," he corrected gently. "When we are alone, I would hear my name from your lips, not my title." Startled, she met his gaze. "That would be improper. I am Pharaoh. I define what is proper." His smile softened the statement. "Walk with me, Asenath." They strolled in silence until he spoke again. "You impressed many yesterday with your judgment of the merchants' dispute. I fear I may have offended those who prefer strict tradition. Egypt has survived for 3,000 years by balancing tradition with adaptation." He gestured toward the distant fields. "Like the Nile, constant in its cycle, yet never exactly the same from year to year." They reached a secluded bench beneath a flowering acacia. At this vantage, they could see palace life unfolding, servants hurrying on errands, nobles conversing in courtyards. "What do you see?" he asked. "A palace functioning like a body, each person a necessary part. Most nobles see only hierarchies, who stands above whom." Asenath hesitated. "May I ask something, divine?" "Amenhotep." "Anything? Why did you choose me?" "Truly." His expression grew serious. "I've watched you for months. While others sought to be noticed, you sought to be useful. While beautiful women competed for my glance, you focused on correcting ledgers and helping those beneath your station. You saw all that. A good pharaoh sees everything." He touched her hand briefly. "Beauty is common in palaces. Kindness and wisdom are rare." Neither noticed Nefertari watching from a distance, her face a mask of controlled fury. Beside her, Meritatan whispered, "See how he looks at her, like a lovesick boy rather than god-king." "It changes nothing," Nefertari replied. "My father arrives tomorrow. Soon this aberration will be corrected." That evening, as Asenath prepared for sleep, Tani discovered her hidden clay tablet. "Mistress, your writing is exceptional," she exclaimed. "Better than many male scribes. My secret shame." Asenath smiled ruefully. "A woman who thinks too much, not shame, strength," Tani insisted. "Perhaps that's what the pharaoh sees." Asenath took back the tablet. "Perhaps. But in my experience, men rarely value a woman's mind over her appearance. The pharaoh might be different. Every woman tells herself the man she admires is different," Asenath replied softly. "Usually she's wrong." The palace hummed with preparations for the festival of Opet, a 16-day celebration when Amun's statue would journey from Karnak to Luxor Temple. For the royal court, it meant elaborate ceremonies, public appearances, and most importantly, a chance for the pharaoh to present his chosen consort to the people. Asenath stood still as 4 handmaidens draped her festival robe, a masterpiece of fine linen adorned with beadwork and golden thread. Despite its generous cut, the garment emphasized her full figure rather than disguising it. "The Divine One commissioned it specially," explained the head seamstress. "He insisted on lapis lazuli beads for the collar, to match your eyes." Asenath touched the intricate beadwork with wonder. Never had she worn anything so fine. "It's too much." "Nothing is too much for the woman. The pharaoh honors," replied the seamstress, though her tone suggested she personally disagreed. In the adjacent wing, Lord Amenemhat's arrival caused considerable stir. Tall and commanding like his daughter, he brought an entourage of 40 soldiers and numerous gifts for the pharaoh. Nefertari greeted him with perfect filial respect. "Father, thank you for coming so quickly." Amenemhat dismissed his attendants with a wave. "Your message suggested urgency. This just an unorthodox choice the pharaoh has made." It continues. "He seems increasingly enamored," Nefertari confirmed. "The girl is clever. I'll grant her that. She hides considerable education behind that plain face." "Education?" Her father's eyebrows rose. "In a woman." Her father was a scribe who taught her alongside male students. Amenemhat frowned. "Inappropriate, but not insurmountable." The pharaoh seeks an alliance with our family. He needs southern support against the Hittite threat. Perhaps he can be reasoned with. Nefertari's smile was cold. And if reason fails, we have alternatives. The festival procession offers opportunities. That evening, Kaby slipped through shadowed corridors, a small vial clutched in her palm. Reaching Asenath's chambers, she nodded to a guard whose loyalty had been purchased with gold. Lady Nefertari requests her cosmetics case returned, she explained to Asenath's handmaiden. She loaned it earlier. I've seen no cosmetics case, the woman replied suspiciously. Perhaps it was delivered to the wrong chamber. While I'm here, may I pay respects to Lady Asenath? We served together in the temple of Hathor as girls. The handmaiden hesitated, then stepped aside. She bathes. You may wait. Once alone, Kaby moved quickly to where the festival robe hung. From her vial, she sprinkled colorless liquid across the garment's right shoulder and sleeve. The potent mixture of natron, lotus extract, and corrosive mineral would remain invisible until activated by body heat during the procession. Then it would eat through beadwork and fabric alike, creating a spectacle of public humiliation. Hearing approaching footsteps, Kaby slipped the empty vial into her sash and adopted a posture of patient waiting. Asenath entered, wrapped in a drying cloth, her wet hair loose around her shoulders. Surprise registered on her face. Forgive the intrusion, Kaby bowed. I served with your handmaiden at Hathor's temple and wish to pay respects. How kind, Asenath replied, though wariness tinged her voice. After Kaby departed, she examined her chamber carefully. Something felt amiss, though nothing appeared disturbed. Dawn of the festival arrived with blaring trumpets and chanting priests. Asenath rose early, an inexplicable sense of foreboding following her through morning preparations. When her handmaiden brought the festival robe, Asenath noticed a strange, faint odor. Has this been stored near Natron? She asked, examining the garment closely. No, mistress. It's been hanging where the seamstress left it. Remembering her father's teachings about temple chemicals, Asenath's suspicions crystallized. Bring me a copper bowl with vinegar and crushed cedar berries quickly. When the materials arrived, she carefully tested the robe, dabbing areas with the solution. Where the liquid touched the right shoulder, the fabric sizzled faintly, confirming her fears. It's been treated with something corrosive, she explained to her horrified handmaiden. Activated by heat, it would have dissolved during the procession. Who would do such a thing? Asenath's expression hardened. Who indeed, with the procession only hours away, panic threatened. The robe had taken weeks to create. No replacement could be made in time. Asenath closed her eyes, remembering her father's calm approach to crises. Bring my sewing kit and fresh linen. We must work quickly. As nobles assembled for the procession, Pharaoh Amenhotep noticed Lord Amenamet's calculating gaze. The southern provinces welcome your rule, Divine One. The Lord stated, though many are surprised by recent developments at court, change often surprises those fixed in old patterns. Amenhotep replied evenly. Their conversation halted as Asenath appeared. Gasps and whispers swept through the gathering. Rather than the ruined robe, she wore a simpler garment, yet somehow more striking. She had deconstructed the damaged section and reused the beadwork to create an asymmetrical design. The lapis collar remained intact, drawing attention to her face rather than her figure. Necessity births creativity, she murmured to the astonished Pharaoh as she took her place beside him. Nefertari's face betrayed nothing, but her eyes met Kaby's with silent fury. Somehow the intended humiliation had transformed into unexpected triumph. The festival of opiate continued for 15 more days, but the failed sabotage attempt drove whispers underground, transforming into something more insidious. Nefertari, recognizing that direct attacks had proven ineffective, employed subtler methods. Did you know, she murmured to a group of noble wives during an evening banquet, that our pharaoh's unusual choice comes from quite mysterious origins? Her father was a scribe, someone offered. Nothing mysterious there. Her father, yes. Nefertari sipped her wine, but what of her mother? No one seems to know where she came from. Some say she was a foreigner, perhaps even Hittite. The accusation hung in the air, like poison. Egypt's tensions with the Hittite Empire had escalated recently, with border skirmishes threatening to erupt into open warfare. "Surely not," gasped one woman. "The pharaoh wouldn't choose someone with enemy blood." "Perhaps he doesn't know," suggested Nefertari innocently. "After all, how thoroughly can one investigate a common scribe's family?" The rumor scroll, a document containing carefully crafted allegations against Asenath, never existed as a physical object, yet spread more effectively than any written text could have. Meritatin ensured the whispers reached religious authorities, suggesting Asenath practiced foreign magic rather than proper Egyptian rituals. Kenwaset carried tales to military circles, implying that the pharaoh's judgment might be compromised by foreign influence in his bedchamber. By the 5th day after the festival, the rumors had reached Asenath herself. "They're saying your mother was a Hittite spy," Tani reported, her young face troubled, "and that you practice foreign sorcery to bewitch the pharaoh." Asenath set aside her breakfast, untouched. "My mother was from Avaris in the Delta. She died birthing me. There was nothing mysterious about her, except perhaps her patience in loving my father, despite his obsession with scrolls and calculations. Truth matters little against determined enemies, mistress." Later that morning, Asenath encountered open hostility for the first time when visiting the temple of Isis. A priestess refused to accept her offering, turning away with barely concealed contempt. "The goddess accepts only pure Egyptian devotions," the woman stated loudly enough for all to hear. Asenath felt blood rush to her face. "I am as Egyptian as you, priestess. Are you? Strange that no one remembers your mother or her family. Strange that you practice arts uncommon for women. Perhaps the old ways, the true Egyptian ways, matter little to you." The accusation struck at Asenath's deepest insecurity, that her father's progressive ideas about female education had somehow made her less traditionally Egyptian, less feminine, less worthy. She returned to the palace with her offering rejected and her spirit bruised, only to find Vizier Imhotep waiting with a grave expression. "Lady Asenath, the Divine One wishes to see you immediately." She followed him to the pharaoh's private council chamber. Amenhotep sat alone, a troubled expression darkening his usually serene features. "Leave us," he commanded Imhotep, who departed with obvious reluctance. When they were alone, Amenhotep held up a papyrus. "Do you know what this contains?" Asenath shook her head. "Accusation that your mother was Hittite, that you practice foreign magic, that your elevation threatens Egypt's security." His voice remained calm, but tension lined his face. "These rumors spread through my court like fever." "They are lies," Asenath replied, her voice surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. "I know." He set down the papyrus. "I investigated your family before selecting you. Your mother was a merchant's daughter from Avaris, fully Egyptian for 10 generations. These rumors come from those who cannot accept change." Relief washed over her. "Thank you for your trust. Trust is not the issue. These rumors threaten stability." The priests whisper. Military commanders question. Noble families withdraw support. He looked at her directly. "I need you to publicly address these accusations." "How?" "Tomorrow at court. Speak your truth plainly. Show the strength I know you possess." The following day, the throne room filled beyond capacity. Nobles, priests, and military officers gathered, anticipation crackling like heat lightning before a storm. Asenath entered wearing simple linen, adorned only with her father's clay amulet. When the pharaoh indicated she should speak, a hush fell over the assembly. "I stand before you as daughter of Seneb the scribe and Nebat of Avaris," she began, her voice stronger than she felt. "My blood is Egyptian, my loyalty is to Egypt, and my heart honors our gods and traditions." She paused, looking directly at Nefertari. Those who whisper spread poison, not truth. They fear what they do not understand, that wisdom and worth come in many forms, not all of them beautiful or traditional. Her words hung in the air. Then, unexpectedly, she continued, I understand this fear. Change threatens comfortable certainties, but Egypt has thrived for 3,000 years by finding balance between tradition and progress. I offer my knowledge in service to Egypt, nothing more, nothing less. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, a grizzled military commander stepped forward. Well said, girl, he growled, plain speaking at least, better than courtly whispers. It wasn't wholesale acceptance, but it was a beginning. As the crowd dispersed, Nefertari's expression betrayed nothing, but the tightness around her eyes suggested that this battle, at least, had not gone as planned. 3 weeks after the public confrontation, a more serious crisis emerged. The Nilometer, a stone pillar marked with measurements to track the river's annual flood, showed water levels far below normal. Priests sacked and rechecked the readings, but the truth remained undeniable. The life-giving inundation that should have begun was barely a trickle. The waters are 3 cubits below the minimum needed for planting, reported the high priest of Amun, his weathered face grave. If this continues, famine will follow as surely as night follows day. The pharaoh had convened an emergency council in the hall of Column. Around him sat priests, nobles, and administrators responsible for Egypt's agricultural bounty. For once, court intrigues receded before this existential threat. What do the omens suggest? Amenhotep asked. The gods are displeased, intoned the high priest. Perhaps by recent changes, court. His sidelong glance toward Asenath left little doubt about his meaning. Nefertari, seated among the highest-ranking nobles, spoke next. Divine One, tradition offers clear guidance. In times of drought, we must appease the gods with expanded offerings and sacrifices, triple the temple donations, and perform the ancient rites of Hapi at Memphis, Thebes, and Elephantine simultaneously. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The solution was familiar, comfortable in its orthodoxy. Vizier Imhotep cleared his throat. Such ceremonies require significant resources. Divine One, the royal granaries are already low, from last year's mediocre harvest. Would you risk divine displeasure to save grain? Challenged the high priest. The god's favor is worth any material cost. Imhotep's eyes moved to Asenath, who had remained silent. You have thoughts, Lady Asenath. She hesitated, aware that contradicting the priests carried significant risk. Divine One, perhaps we might supplement traditional ceremonies with practical measures. Practical measures. The high priest's tone conveyed skepticism bordering on contempt. In my father's village near the first cataract, they faced low floods twice in my lifetime. The elders implemented water conservation methods, terraced irrigation channels to maximize every drop, rotation of fields, selection of crops requiring less moisture. She spoke carefully, avoiding any suggestion that ritual alone might be insufficient. Peasant tricks, scoffed a noble lord. We need divine intervention, not farming techniques. Why not both? Asenath suggested. Honor the gods with ceremonies while also employing practical wisdom they have granted us through experience. The council chamber erupted in conflicting voices. Amenhotep raised his hand for silence. Egypt faces an unprecedented threat. We will address it with both tradition and innovation. His decision silenced further debate. The temples will receive resources for ceremonies. Meanwhile, Lady Asenath will work with irrigation engineers to implement conservation methods. The high priest bowed stiffly. As the Divine One commands. Though some might question whether an untested woman should influence matters so crucial to Egypt's survival, I question whether anyone should ignore useful knowledge based on its source, countered the pharaoh. Lady Asenath will collaborate with your temple engineers, not replace them. As the council dispersed, Lord Amenemhat approached his daughter. "You missed an opportunity," he murmured. "The drought could have been your path to restoration." Nefertari watched Asenath deep in conversation with the royal architect. "Perhaps it still can be. If her methods fail while traditional ceremonies continue, who will receive blame? And if the drought worsens regardless of any intervention, then all of Egypt suffers," her father finished. "A calculated risk," she admitted, "but the pharaoh has staked his reputation on her wisdom. If that wisdom proves faulty..." The following days saw feverish activity throughout Egypt. Temples filled with offerings and incense, while engineers began implementing Asenath's suggestions. She worked tirelessly, drawing irrigation plans and consulting with farmers from the Delta to the first cataract. In her rare private moments with Amenhotep, doubt sometimes surfaced. "What if I'm wrong?" she asked, one evening, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the darkened Nile. "What if the priests are right and the gods are displeased with me?" "The gods created the Nile cycles long before this season," he replied. "Whatever causes this drought, it isn't you. But if my methods fail, then we will have tried everything possible." He took her hand, a rare public display of affection. A pharaoh who relies only on prayers while his people starve is no true shepherd of Egypt. From the shadows, Nefertari observed their intimacy with narrowed eyes. The drought had postponed her plans, but perhaps created a greater opportunity. Amenhotep had publicly tied his judgment to Asenath's practical approach. If that approach failed spectacularly enough, she summoned Kamwaset to her chambers that night. "Find me men familiar with the irrigation systems being built," she instructed. "Men who value gold above loyalty." "You plan to sabotage the irrigation works?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "Not yet, but when the moment is right, we should be prepared to help the gods demonstrate their displeasure with our fat little scribe." 2 weeks into the drought crisis, with both religious ceremonies and practical measures underway, the high priest of Amen proposed a ceremonial dance to honor Hapi, god of the Nile's flood. According to ancient tradition, the most accomplished women of the court would perform, their movement symbolizing the river's life-giving flow. The dance of the inundation hasn't been performed in 3 generations. Vizier Imhotep informed the pharaoh, but the priests believe its power could turn the tide of our misfortune. Imhotep nodded thoughtfully. "Very well, the ceremony will take place at the next full moon." The announcement sent ripples of excitement through the palace. Court ladies began practicing immediately, none more diligently than Nefertari, whose grace and beauty made her a natural choice to lead the sacred performance. When Asenath received notice that she too was expected to participate, her first reaction was dismay. "I cannot dance before the entire court," she protested to Tani. "I lack the training, the grace." "The pharaoh specifically requested your participation," Tani replied. "To refuse would insult both him and the gods." Reluctantly, Asenath began practicing in private. Her movements were earnest but lacked the fluid elegance of lifelong dancers. Each day, awareness of her body's limitations, its fullness, its untrained heaviness, intensified her anxiety. The night before the ceremony, Amenhotep found her practicing alone in a secluded courtyard. "You avoid the group rehearsals," he observed. Asenath lowered her gaze. "I would embarrass you, Divine One. My body was not made for dance. Your body was made for life like the Nile itself." He lifted her chin gently. "The river isn't admired for its slenderness, but for its power, its abundance, its capacity to nourish. The court expects beauty and perfection. The gods expect truth." His voice softened. "Dance honestly, Asenath. Dance as yourself, not as you think others wish you to be." The ceremonial chamber filled beyond capacity on the night of the performance. Golden sistrums of Hathor, sacred rattles used to accompany ritual dances, gleamed in the hands of temple musicians. Incense hung thick in the air as priests chanted invocations to Hapi. Nefertari led the procession of dancers, her slender body adorned with blue and green beads, symbolizing water. She moved with practiced precision, each gesture fluid and perfect. The audience watched in appreciative silence as she executed the traditional choreography flawlessly, her years of training evident in every movement. 6 other noble women followed, each performing admirably if less spectacularly. Then came Asenath's turn. She entered wearing simple linen dyed with the same blue-green hues, though on her fuller figure, the effect was quite different. A ripple of whispers passed through the crowd. Some faces showed disdain, others curiosity. The music began, the rhythmic shaking of sistrums accompanied by reed flutes. For a moment Asenath stood frozen, acutely aware of her inadequacy among these lifelong courtiers. Then she remembered her father's village during flood season. The joy when waters rose, the community's celebration, the simple, honest movements of farmers and children welcoming life-giving waters. Closing her eyes, she began to dance. Her movements lacked Nefertari's technical precision, but carried something the other performances had not: authentic emotion. Where the court ladies had displayed perfect form, Asenath displayed perfect feeling. Her body moved with the genuine reverence of one who understood water's true value to common Egyptians. The audience's response transformed gradually from bemused tolerance to surprised attention. Even some priests nodded appreciatively at the sincerity evident in her improvised interpretation. When she finished, the silence felt different than it had for the other dancers, contemplative rather than merely respectful. The pharaoh's eyes held something that made her heart quicken. The high priest stepped forward to conclude the ceremony. But before he could speak, a court musician cried out and pointed toward the sistrum in his hands. The sacred rattle had begun vibrating on its own, producing a soft, continuous tone without being shaken. "An omen," gasped the high priest, genuine awe replacing his usual skepticism. Hathor herself speaks through her instrument. The religious significance of this apparent miracle immediately elevated the ceremony from mere tradition to divine intervention. Court spiritualists debated its meaning late into the night, with some suggesting Hathor, goddess of music, dance, and femininity, had shown particular favor. Nefertari observed the aftermath with calculation. "How fortunate that a miracle occurred during the Fat One's performance," she remarked to Meritaten, almost as if it were arranged. "You think she engineered it somehow?" Meritaten asked, surprised. Who knows what tricks her foreign mother might have taught her? Nefertari sipped her wine thoughtfully. The pharaoh was clearly moved, not by her clumsy dancing but by this convenient divine sign. Yet beneath her skepticism lay a deeper concern. The court's reaction to Asenath's dance had been unexpectedly positive. Something about her authentic, untrained movements had resonated with observers, tired of court artifice. In attempting to display Asenath's inadequacy, the dance ceremony had instead revealed her greatest strength, her genuine connection to Egypt's heart beyond palace walls. As drought conditions persisted into the second month, Egypt faced another challenge. A diplomatic delegation arrived from Mitanni, a powerful kingdom to the northeast. With resources strained by the water crisis, the timing couldn't have been worse, yet international relations couldn't be postponed. The Mitanni bring 23 delegates, Vizier Imhotep informed the pharaoh during morning council. Led by Prince Tushratta, nephew to their king, they seek to renegotiate trade agreements and offer military alliance against the Hittites. Amenhotep nodded gravely. A critical opportunity. The drought makes us appear vulnerable. We must project strength while securing favorable terms. The court mobilized to impress the foreign visitors despite limited resources. Nefertari, whose mother had Mitanni ancestry, was appointed as cultural liaison due to her fluency in their language. "A perfect opportunity to demonstrate my value," she told her father as they prepared for the welcome banquet. "The pharaoh will be reminded of what a politically advantageous match I have been." Lord Amenemhat adjusted his ceremonial collar. Do not focus solely on the pharaoh. The Mitanni prince is unmarried and reportedly seeks an Egyptian bride to cement alliances. Nefertari considered this new angle. Though I prefer to be Egypt's queen, becoming Mitanni's future queen consort would be a worthy alternative and perhaps a more effective path to influence. The banquet unfolded with all the splendor Egypt could muster. Prince Tushratta, young, handsome, and charismatic, was clearly impressed by Nefertari, whose exotic beauty and perfect command of his language made her stand out among the court ladies. Asenath, seated farther down the table, observed their interaction with interest rather than jealousy. The prince seemed genuinely charming, and Nefertari's animation in his presence revealed a side of her rarely displayed at court. When Amenhotep introduced Asenath as his honored companion, Tushratta's well-trained diplomatic face revealed only momentary surprise at her unconventional appearance before he bowed respectfully. "You honor us with your presence, Lady Asenath," he said through an interpreter, as she was not expected to speak Mitanni. To everyone's surprise, she responded in his language, not with Nefertari's fluency, but with passable basic phrases. "The honor is Egypt's, to welcome such distinguished guests." Later, as musicians performed, Amenhotep questioned her quietly. "You speak Mitanni?" She smiled. "Very little. My father transcribed diplomatic correspondence for years. I picked up phrases from the Mitanni tablets he brought home." The next 3 days were filled with negotiations. Nefertari served as primary translator, her quick mind and linguistic skills proving invaluable. Prince Tushratta clearly admired her, finding excuses to extend conversations beyond diplomatic necessities. On the 4th day, the treaty seal was prepared, a ceremonial clay seal that would formalize the new agreements. Hours before the signing ceremony, Asenath requested permission to review the Mitanni version of the document. Lady Nefertari has already confirmed the translations are accurate. Vizier Imhotep objected. "I'm certain they are," Asenath replied diplomatically. "I merely wish to understand the agreement fully before the ceremony." Reluctantly, Imhotep provided access to the document. Asenath spent 2 hours comparing the Egyptian and Mitanni versions, making careful notes on a separate papyrus. When she finally sought a private audience with the pharaoh, her expression was troubled. "Divine One, there is a discrepancy between the versions. Small but significant." Amenhotep examined her notes carefully. "This clause regarding water rights along our shared tributaries. In our version, it guarantees Egypt's primary access during drought conditions. In theirs, the wording is subtly different, granting Mitanni equal rights regardless of conditions. This could be devastating given our current crisis." Amenhotep realized, if they could legally divert upstream water, precisely. The difference is just 2 hieratic symbols, easily overlooked even by someone fluent in both languages. The pharaoh's eyes narrowed. Was this deliberate deception, or genuine misunderstanding? "I cannot say, Divine One, but addressing it before the sealing ceremony seems prudent." Rather than creating a diplomatic incident, Amenhotep chose a subtle approach. During pre-ceremony pleasantries, he casually mentioned the specific water rights clause, clearly stating Egypt's understanding of its terms. Prince Tushratta's momentary hesitation was barely perceptible, but his chief scribe immediately requested to review the documents for minor scribal corrections. When the ceremony proceeded an hour later, the discrepancy had been resolved in Egypt's favor. That evening, Amenhotep publicly acknowledged Asenath's contribution. "Your careful attention potentially saved Egypt from significant hardship," he told her, loud enough for court officials to hear. "Your father would be proud of your scribal diligence." Nefertari, who had spent the evening enjoying Prince Tushratta's admiration, found her diplomatic triumph somewhat overshadowed. She had performed her translating duties flawlessly, yet somehow missed a critical detail that Asenath, with her limited Mitanni, had caught. "Fortunate coincidence that she reviewed those specific clauses," she commented to Meritatin. "Perhaps not coincidence," her friend replied. One of the scribes mentioned she requested earlier treaty documents from the archives yesterday, those from the last 3 Mitanni negotiations. She prepared specifically to find an error, Nefertari realized, to create this moment of triumph. A clever move, Meritatin admitted. Though it's strange, she doesn't seem to seek glory from it. Indeed, Asenath had already returned to discussions with irrigation engineers, seemingly uninterested in leveraging her diplomatic success for court advantage. That, Nefertari murmured, watching Prince Tushratta approach her with obvious interest, may be her most cunning strategy of all. With the Mitanni delegation departed and diplomatic success secured, attention returned to the drought crisis. 3 months had passed since the first troubling nillimeter readings. Asenath's water conservation methods were showing modest success. Fields near the demonstration sites remained productive despite minimal irrigation, but the situation remained dire across most of Egypt. The strain had begun taking its toll on everyone, including Nefertari. One evening, seeking solitude, she wandered to the palace's sacred pool, where lotus flowers bloomed despite the drought, carefully tended by temple gardeners who considered the plants manifestations of divine creation. She sat at the pool's edge, trailing fingers through cool water, her usual entourage dismissed. In rare privacy, she allowed her perfect court mask to slip, revealing exhaustion and uncertainty beneath. "What am I becoming?" she whispered to her reflection. The past months had transformed her single-minded pursuit of the Pharaoh into something darker. Each failed scheme against Asenath had led to increasingly desperate measures. The most recent, a plan to sabotage key irrigation channels, had been abandoned at the last moment when she realized how many innocent farmers would suffer. A movement at the pool's opposite side startled her. Asenath stood there, equally surprised by Nefertari's presence. "Forgive me," Asenath said quietly. "I didn't mean to intrude on your solitude." Nefertari's instinct was to respond with cutting dismissal, but weariness softened her usual sharpness. "The pool is palace property, not mine." An awkward silence stretched between them, 2 women who had never spoken directly without others present, whose lives had become entangled in opposition. "The lotuses thrive despite everything," Asenath finally observed, gesturing to the pink and white blossoms. "Their roots reach deep enough to find water others cannot access." "A convenient metaphor for yourself," Nefertari replied, though without real venom. Asenath smiled faintly. "I wasn't thinking in metaphors, just appreciating beauty that persists through hardship." Another silence followed, less tense than before. Then, surprising herself, Nefertari asked, "Do you love him?" The directness of the question startled Asenath. "The Pharaoh? No. The temple cat." "Yes, the Pharaoh. I respect him deeply," Asenath answered carefully. "He sees value where others see only appearances." "That isn't what I asked." Asenath met her gaze. "Does it matter? He chose me regardless of my feelings." "It matters to me." Nefertari plucked a lotus blossom, examining its perfect petals. "I was raised from birth to become queen. Every lesson, every skill cultivated for that single purpose. When he chose you instead, it wasn't just disappointment. It was the collapse of my entire existence." The unexpected vulnerability shocked both women. Nefertari herself seemed startled by her confession. "I never sought to replace you," Asenath said softly. "I never imagined myself in this position, which makes it worse somehow." Nefertari twirled the lotus stem between her fingers. "You achieved effortlessly what I couldn't gain through years of perfect preparation." "Not effortlessly," Asenath corrected. "My father prepared me differently. While you learned court etiquette, I learned accounting. While you practiced dance, I studied architecture and medicine. Different preparations for different lives. And yet here we are, in the same arena. An arena I never asked to enter." Nefertari studied her rival with new consideration. "Prince Tushratta was quite taken with you, despite your unconventional attributes. You could have encouraged him, secured a powerful position in Mitanni. To what end? I have no interest in power for its own sake. Everyone desires power. I desire purpose, Asenath corrected. The opportunity to use what I know to benefit others. Nefertari laughed softly. How sickeningly noble. Not nobility, practicality. Power without purpose is a flame that eventually consumes its bearer. The conversation might have continued toward genuine understanding, but at that moment, Nefertari appeared at the garden entrance. Nefertari, there you are. I've been searching everywhere. She approached hurriedly, then stopped short at the sight of Asenath. Her expression hardened. Am I interrupting something? Nothing of consequence, Nefertari replied, her court mask sliding back into place. What news? A private matter. Nefertari glanced meaningfully at Asenath. Excuse me, Asenath said, recognizing the dismissal. I should check on the eastern irrigation reports before tomorrow's council. As she departed, Nefertari felt an unexpected twinge of regret. Something rare had begun forming between them. Not friendship, certainly, but perhaps understanding. You were speaking with her civilly, Nefertari observed, suspicion edging her voice. Has something changed? Nefertari straightened her shoulders. Nothing has changed. I was merely assessing her weaknesses from a different angle. Good. Because I've discovered something significant, something that could finally remove her from the Pharaoh's side permanently. What have you found? Nefertari lowered her voice. Evidence that her water conservation methods are failing catastrophically at the southern sites. Fields are dying where she promised salvation. That seems unlikely. The northern implementations are working well. See for yourself. I've arranged a witness from the southern province to testify before the Pharaoh tomorrow. Nefertari's eyes gleamed with anticipation. This is the opportunity we've awaited. When her precious practical methods fail, while the temple rituals continue, who will the Pharaoh and Egypt blame? Nefertari gazed down at the lotus blossom still in her hand. After a moment's hesitation, she crushed it. The allegations of irrigation failure proved false. The witness was discovered to be a farmer from different lands altogether, paid to lie about conditions he had never seen. Though the scheme collapsed quickly, it marked a turning point in palace intrigue. Desperation was replacing calculation, dangerous lines were being crossed. 1 week later, the first measurable rainfall in months fell across Thebes. Though modest, it offered hope that the worst of the drought might be ending. The pharaoh declared a feast of thanksgiving, inviting nobles, priests, and even common citizens who had contributed to drought management efforts. A politically astute move, observed Vizier Imhotep as servants transformed the great hall into a banquet space. The people need celebration after such hardship. More than political, Imhotep replied, genuine gratitude is due to many who have worked tirelessly, both in temples and fields. The feast exceeded expectation. Food was plentiful despite the drought, tables laden with bread, fish, fowl, fruit, and sweetmeats. Wine flowed freely, musicians played, and dancers performed between courses. The pharaoh sat at the high table with Asenath at his right hand, her position now formalized though not yet solemnized through marriage. Nefertari occupied a place of honor at the same table, her beauty enhanced by an elaborate gown of finest linen and a necklace of lapis and gold. She played her court role perfectly, gracious, charming, apparently accepting of her diminished status. You seem in good spirits, Asenath commented during a moment when they found themselves momentarily alone. The rain offers hope. Nefertari replied, Egypt's welfare matters more than personal disappointments. Asenath studied her, remembering their interrupted conversation at the lotus pool. I believe you mean. Before Nefertari could respond, a young servant approached with a special chalice, a ceremonial cup meant for ritual toasting. The vessel was gold inlaid with carnelian and turquoise, used only on significant state occasions. The high priest sends this with his blessing. The servant girl announced, presenting the chalice to Asenath, sacred wine from the temple vineyards, untouched by the drought. Asenath accepted it with appropriate reverence. "Convey my gratitude to the high priest." As the feast progressed toward its ceremonial conclusion, Amenhotep rose for the traditional blessing. All eyes turned to the royal dais as he lifted his own chalice. "To Egypt eternal, beloved of the gods," he intoned. "May Hapi's waters return in abundance." The assembly raised their cups in response. Asenath lifted the ceremonial chalice to her lips, then paused. The serving girl who had delivered it stood nearby, watching not with the usual servant's downcast eyes, but with unusual intensity. It was Tani, the child whose bruised wrist Asenath had treated months ago. Something in her expression, fear mixed with warning, triggered Asenath's suspicion. Lowering the cup without drinking, she smiled apologetically to the pharaoh and beckoned Tani close. "Is something amiss with the wine?" she asked quietly. Tani's eyes darted fearfully toward the temple contingent. She began, then fell silent. "You can speak freely," Asenath assured her. "The high priest didn't send it," the girl whispered. "I was told to say that." "I'm sorry, mistress, I didn't know." A commotion interrupted them. A small child, a noble son brought to the feast, had wandered to the high table and, finding Asenath's untouched chalice, taken an impulsive sip before his nurse could stop him. Now he lay convulsing on the floor, foam bubbling from blue-tinged lips. "Poison!" someone shouted as panic erupted. Asenath moved with surprising speed for her size, kneeling beside the child. "Bring me natron, honey, and fresh milk," she commanded. Quickly, while guards secured the hall and the pharaoh called for order, Asenath worked frantically to save the boy. From a pouch at her waist, she produced dried herbs, crushing them between her fingers. "Open his mouth," she instructed the child's distraught mother. "Hold him steady." When the requested ingredients arrived, she mixed them with practiced efficiency, forming a paste which she fed to the barely conscious child in small amounts. "What is that?" the royal physician demanded, arriving belatedly. "Cardamom, honey and natron, to induce vomiting," Asenath explained without pausing her work. "The milk binds with certain poisons before they can be fully absorbed." For tense minutes, the entire assembly watched as she fought for the child's life. Finally, the boy vomited violently, expelling dark fluid. His breathing gradually steadied, color returning to his face. "He will live," Asenath announced, exhaustion evident in her voice, "though he requires careful monitoring for 2 days." As guards questioned servants and investigated how the poisoned chalice had reached the high table, Amenhotep's face darkened with barely controlled fury. "This was meant for you," he told Asenath, his voice low. "Someone in this hall attempted murder, not just against you, but against Egypt's future." He raised his voice to address the stunned assembly. "Let it be known, this attack will be treated as treason against the throne itself. No one leaves until the culprit is identified." From her position near the temple delegation, Nefertari watched with genuine shock. She had schemed, spread rumors, even considered sabotage, but poisoning a royal chalice crossed into territory even she found abhorrent. More disturbing still was the realization, forming in her mind, she might not be the only player in this dangerous game, and some were playing by far deadlier rules than she had imagined. The investigation into the poisoning lasted 3 days. Palace guards questioned everyone present at the feast, from highest noble to lowest servant. No one was exempt, not even Nefertari, whose proximity to earlier schemes made her an obvious suspect. "I have schemed, yes," she admitted when questioned privately by the pharaoh himself. "I have spread rumors and attempted to undermine her position. But poison?" She met his gaze directly. "Never. That crosses a boundary even I respect." Surprisingly, Asenath supported her denial. "Lady Nefertari has opposed me openly," she told Amenhotep. "Poison is the weapon of one without the courage for open confrontation." On the 3rd day, the investigation reached its climax when Kebi Nefertari's handmaiden was discovered attempting to flee the palace. When apprehended, she carried a small alabaster box containing herbs identical to residue found in the poisoned chalice. The confession stone, a ceremonial tablet upon which the guilty were required to inscribe their crimes before punishment, was prepared in the hall of judgment. Court officials, nobles, and priests assembled to witness justice. Kebi knelt before the stone, trembling visibly as Vizier Imhotep read the accusations against her. "You are charged with attempted murder through poison, a crime against both divine and earthly law," he intoned. "Evidence has been found in your possession. What say you?" "I acted alone," Kebi whispered, eyes downcast. "My mistress knew nothing of my plan." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Few believed a handmaiden would independently attempt such a serious crime. "You expect us to believe you conceived this plot without direction?" Imhotep pressed. "That you obtained rare poisons and arranged their delivery without assistance?" "I obtained the herbs from a market woman who deals in such things." Kebi's voice strengthened slightly. Lady Nefertari spoke often of her frustration. "I thought to help her regain favor by removing her rival." Nefertari stepped forward. "This is absurd. Kebi has been my handmaiden for 7 years. She has never shown such initiative in choosing my breakfast fruits, let alone in committing murder. Yet the evidence in her possession is undeniable," countered Imhotep. "Evidence can be planted," Nefertari argued, surprising many with her defense of a servant. "Someone may be using Kebi to shield themselves." The debate continued until Asenath requested permission to question Kebi directly. The pharaoh, curious about her approach, granted. "Kebi," Asenath began gently. "The poison used was extracted from black lotus and combined with minerals from the eastern desert. Such knowledge is rare outside temple physicians and professional poisoners. How did you learn to prepare it?" Kebi's composure faltered. "I followed written instructions. From whom?" "I cannot say." Asenath changed tactics. "The serving girl who brought the chalice, how did you convince her to participate?" "Gold," Kebi mumbled. "I paid her. With what resources? A handmaiden's wages would scarcely cover such a bribe." Kebi remained silent, her earlier confession unraveling under precise questioning. Finally, Asenath turned to the pharaoh. "Divine One, I believe Kebi acted under direction, but not from Lady Nefertari. What evidence supports this belief?" Imhotep asked. "First, the poison's composition requires specialized knowledge. Second, the timing coincides with the drought's potential ending, when my irrigation methods might receive credit for averting catastrophe. Third," she glanced toward the temple delegation, "certain factions have more to lose from changing traditions than any single courtier." The high priest of Amun rose in objection. "You dare accuse the temple. I accuse no one specifically." Asenath replied carefully. "I merely observe that traditional power structures resist change, sometimes desperately." After further deliberation, the pharaoh rendered judgment. "Kebi will remain imprisoned until full truth emerges. Investigations will continue into who may have directed her actions." His gaze swept the assembly. "Let all understand, attempts against those under royal protection will not succeed, nor go unpunished." As the formal proceedings concluded, Nefertari approached Asenath in a relatively private alcove. "You defended me," she observed, confusion evident in her voice. "Why?" "Because truth matters more than convenient accusations," Asenath replied. "And because I believe what you said, you scheme but within certain boundaries. You understand me better than I expected." Nefertari studied her rival with new respect. "This attempt was clumsy, desperate, not my style at all. The real question is, who benefits from making you appear responsible?" Asenath glanced toward where Vizier Imhotep conversed with temple officials. "Perhaps someone who would eliminate both of us in one stroke." Nefertari followed her gaze thoughtfully. "Imhotep has served 3 pharaohs. He values stability above all. And I represent unwelcome change, while I represent disappointed traditional expectations." Nefertari's lips curved in a humorless smile. "How ironic. if we find common cause after all. The pharaoh believes someone within the court actively works against his choices, Asenath said carefully. Someone with significant influence and resources. Nefertari added, poison of that quality doesn't come cheaply. Their unexpected alliance remained tentative, awareness of past hostilities, creating barriers to full trust. Yet both recognized that the game had changed, becoming deadlier and more complex than either had anticipated. Before they parted, Nefertari touched Asenath's arm briefly. Watch the cupbearer with the scarred hand. He serves Imhotep's household, but reports to the high priest. Little occurs in the palace without his knowledge. Thank you, Asenath replied, genuine gratitude in her voice. Don't mistake prudence for friendship, Nefertari warned, though without real malice. I simply prefer that if anyone removes you from the pharaoh's side, it be me rather than poison. 2 weeks after the poisoning incident, as the drought finally began to ease with scattered rainfall, a new crisis emerged. A mysterious illness spread through Thebes, initially affecting riverside communities before reaching the palace itself. Victims suffered high fever, painful swelling of the lymph nodes, and in severe cases death within days. 28 dead in the lower city, reported the royal physician, his lined face grave. Twice that many ill. The sickness spreads through proximity, though its exact nature eludes us. The pharaoh ordered immediate measures, isolation of the sick, purification rituals in temples, and consultations with every healer in Thebes. Despite these efforts, the disease continued its relentless advance. When palace servants began falling ill, fear gripped the court. Many nobles fled to country estates, abandoning the pharaoh in his time of need. Those who remained walked through incense-filled corridors, with scented cloths pressed to their faces, avoiding all unnecessary contact. Asenath approached Amenhotep as he received the latest reports. Divine One, my father collected medical texts from throughout Egypt and beyond. Among them were accounts of similar symptoms from the eastern lands. What did these accounts suggest as treatment? He asked, hope flickering in his tired eyes. A combination of herbs, myrrh, cardamom and dried lily bulbs, boiled with honey and administered thrice daily. Also the isolation of the sick and burning of their linens. The pharaoh immediately authorized implementation of these measures, placing Asenath in charge of a treatment facility established in a separate wing of the palace. For 3 days, she worked tirelessly, directing servants in preparing remedies, monitoring patients, and maintaining strict isolation protocols. Her practical knowledge complemented the temple physician's expertise, creating an effective partnership despite initial resistance to her authority. On the 4th day, as Asenath supervised the preparation of medicine, using a mortar and pestle that had become her constant tools, a servant brought unexpected news. Nefertari had fallen ill. She refused treatment until now, the messenger reported. But her fever has grown dangerous. Her father is away inspecting southern provinces and cannot be reached. Despite their complicated history, Asenath didn't hesitate. Prepare a chamber in the isolation wing. I will treat her myself. When she entered Nefertari's chambers, the usual perfection had given way to disorder. The beautiful noblewoman lay feverish on sweat-soaked linens, her perfect features flushed and contorted with pain. I don't need your help, she mumbled when Asenath approached. Clearly, Asenath replied dryly. You're managing splendidly on your own. With gentle firmness, she organized Nefertari's transfer to the treatment wing. There, she personally administered medications, applied cool cloths to burning skin, and ensured proper care. During lucid moments, Nefertari watched her rival with feverish curiosity. Why help me? She asked once. My death would remove your greatest threat. Asenath continued grinding herbs in her mortar. I don't see people as threats or advantages, only as people. How tediously virtuous. Not virtue, practicality. Asenath measured precise amounts of ground herbs. Endless competition exhausts everyone involved. Cooperation achieves more with less effort. Nefertari's condition worsened before it improved. For 2 nights, Asenath remained at her bedside, snatching only brief moments of rest. When the fever finally broke on the 3rd morning, both women were exhausted beyond measure. "You saved my life," Nefertari acknowledged weakly, as she accepted a cup of strengthening broth. "You fought hard," Asenath corrected. "I merely provided tools for your battle." Their tentative understanding deepened through this shared crisis. Nefertari, stripped of courtly artifice by illness, revealed glimpses of the person beneath her perfect exterior, intelligent, determined, and surprisingly thoughtful when not blinded by ambition. As Nefertari recovered, the epidemic reached its peak. Palace corridors emptied as more fell ill or fled. Even some physicians abandoned their posts, fearing contagion. Through it all, Asenath maintained her calm efficiency, organizing remaining staff, prioritizing critical patients, and refining treatments based on observed results. Then the unthinkable happened. The pharaoh himself collapsed during a council meeting. Vizier Imhotep immediately took charge of administrative matters, while Asenath focused entirely on treating Imhotep. His condition deteriorated rapidly, the illness striking with particular virulence. "You must rest," urged a concerned assistant, finding Asenath still working well past midnight. "You've barely slept in days. Egypt needs its pharaoh," she replied simply, returning to her mortar and pestle. As word of Imhotep's illness spread, the temple faction moved quickly to assert influence. The high priest proposed transferring the pharaoh to the temple of Sekhmet, goddess of healing. "Divine intervention is required," he insisted. "Mortal medicine has proven insufficient." Asenath opposed the move. Transportation would worsen his condition, and temple treatments would replace methods currently showing progress. The standoff continued until an unexpected ally intervened. Nefertari, still weak but determined, left her sickbed to support Asenath's position before the royal council. "I live because of these treatments," she stated firmly. "The pharaoh remains here under Lady Asenath's care." For 7 days, Imhotep hovered between life and death. Asenath rarely left his side, adjusting medications, monitoring symptoms, and speaking softly to him, even when unconscious. Her dedication impressed even her harshest critics. Finally, on the 8th day, his fever broke. Though weak, his eyes cleared as he recognized Asenath's exhausted face beside him. "You look terrible," he whispered hoarsely. She laughed through sudden tears. A proper greeting for one's healer. As the pharaoh's recovery began, the epidemic gradually receded throughout Thebes. The final death count reached 300, tragic, yet far fewer than initially feared. When Asenath finally allowed herself proper rest, she discovered a small golden amulet beside her bed, a healing symbol of Sekhmet. With it lay a simple note in elegant handwriting. "Enemies make poor allies against common threats. Perhaps friends make better ones." The aftermath of the epidemic transformed the palace in unexpected ways. As survivors regained strength and mourned those lost, priorities shifted. Petty intrigues seemed suddenly trivial in the face of mortality's stark reminder. For Nefertari, the experience catalyzed profound change. Her brush with death and unexpected salvation at her rival's hands forced reassessment of values she had accepted without question since childhood. One morning, 3 weeks into her recovery, she requested a private audience with Asenath. When the plump woman arrived, Nefertari dismissed her servants with an uncharacteristic lack of ceremony. "I've been reflecting," she began once they were alone, "on purpose and worth." Asenath settled into a chair, her customary calm tinged with curiosity. Serious matters for someone still recovering. Near death concentrates the mind wonderfully. Nefertari picked up a small object wrapped in linen. "I had this made for you." Unwrapping the cloth, Asenath revealed a small amulet of electrum, a blend of gold and silver, shaped like an ankh, with tiny lapis inlays. "It's beautiful," she said, genuinely touched. "A token of gratitude," Nefertari explained. "And perhaps," understand. The amulet represented more than thanks for medical care. It symbolized recognition, one woman acknowledging another's value beyond superficial judgment. "I'm not suddenly a different person," Nefertari cautioned, seeing Asenath's surprise. "I remain ambitious, proud, and sometimes ruthless, but illness stripped away certain illusions." "What sort of illusions?" "That beauty and noble birth automatically confer superior worth. That different means lesser." She touched her throat where swellings had finally receded. "That rivals cannot also be allies." Asenath weighed the amulet in her palm. "This can't have been easy for you. Dying was harder." Nefertari replied with a flash of her old sharpness, though softened by a genuine smile. "Besides, practical considerations remain. The court has changed. New alliances form while we recovered." She was right. During the epidemic's worst days, Vizier Imhotep had consolidated significant authority. With many nobles absent and the pharaoh incapacitated, he had made decisions that expanded his influence considerably. "Imhotep concerns me," Asenath admitted. "He opposed the pharaoh's choice of me from the beginning, but lately his opposition seems more coordinated. He values order above all, and you represent disruption of established patterns." Nefertari hesitated. "There are whispers that he collaborated with temple authorities during the crisis to undermine the pharaoh's recovery. You believe he might have delayed treatments? That's tantamount to treason. I believe he's pragmatic enough to see opportunity in crisis." Nefertari's expression hardened. "And I've learned to recognize ambition in others, having cultivated it so carefully in myself." Their conversation was interrupted by a royal messenger announcing the pharaoh's first public appearance since his illness. Both women hurried to prepare, aware that this ceremony would re-establish patterns of authority disrupted by the epidemic. The throne room filled with courtiers eager to demonstrate their loyalty, including many who had fled during the crisis. Amenhotep entered without his usual ceremonial regalia, still thin from illness, but carrying himself with undiminished dignity. "Egypt has faced dual challenges, drought and disease," he began, his voice stronger than many expected. "Through these trials, true character has revealed itself. Some fled. Some exploited crisis for advantage. Others served with unwavering dedication." His gaze swept the assembly before settling on Asenath. "Among those whose service merits special recognition is Lady Asenath, whose knowledge saved countless lives, including my own." Murmurs rippled through the court as Amenhotep continued. "Therefore, I declare my intention to make official what many have already understood. 1 month hence, Lady Asenath will become my queen in formal ceremony." Though the announcement was expected, its timing immediately following his recovery carried symbolic weight. This was no mere personal preference, but a statement of royal policy. Egypt's future would embrace wisdom alongside tradition. For Asenath, the moment brought complex emotions: honor at the pharaoh's trust, anxiety about increased responsibilities, and genuine affection for the man who had recognized her worth when others saw only her appearance. Nefertari watched with surprising equanimity. The announcement that would once have devastated her now seemed almost inevitable, part of a larger pattern she was beginning to discern. Vizier Imhotep's reaction proved more revealing. Though his face remained impassive, the tightening of his fingers on his ceremonial staff betrayed tension. More concerning was the subtle exchange of glances between him and the high priest of Amun, a silent communication that suggested coordinated opposition. Later, as celebrations continued in the Great Hall, Nefertari approached Asenath discreetly. "Congratulations, future queen," she said, her tone genuine despite a hint of old irony. "Thank you." Asenath glanced toward where Imhotep conversed intensely with several military commanders. "Though I fear the announcement has accelerated certain plans." "Undoubtedly." Nefertari touched the gratitude amulet she had given Asenath, now hanging alongside the woman's father's clay pendant. "Remember, you have more allies than you once did." A strange development indeed, Asenath observed with a small smile. The strangest developments often prove most fortuitous. Nefertari's expression turned serious. Be vigilant in the coming days. The vizier's ambitions won't be easily thwarted. As the women parted, both recognized that something fundamental had shifted. Not friendship exactly, but alliance born of mutual respect and shared awareness of gathering threats that would soon test them both. 3 weeks before Asenath's scheduled coronation as queen, catastrophe struck. Royal treasures, gold artifacts dating to Egypt's earliest dynasties, vanished from their heavily guarded vault. The theft represented not only immense material loss, but also a spiritual wound. Many items possessed religious significance, dating back centuries. This is unprecedented, declared Vizier Imhotep, addressing an emergency council. Such sacred treasures have never before been violated. The pharaoh's expression was thunderous. Every available guard will investigate. Every person with vault access will be questioned. This sacrilege will not stand. As the investigation began, subtle whispers spread through the palace. Whispers implying Asenath might somehow be involved. The rumors gained credibility when a temple acolyte reported seeing someone of her distinctive build near the treasury during prohibited hours. Ridiculous, Imhotep declared, when Imhotep reluctantly shared these accusations. Lady Asenath has proven her character repeatedly. Of course, Divine One, the vizier agreed smoothly. Yet thoroughness demands we investigate all possibilities, however unlikely. By the third day, the whispers had become open speculation. Then came the discovery that shattered the fragile peace of recent weeks. A golden scarab necklace from the missing collection, hidden within Asenath's personal chest. Guards arrived to escort her to the pharaoh's private audience chamber. There she found Amenhotep, looking more troubled than she had ever seen him. The evidence is disturbing, he admitted after explaining the discovery. Yet it contradicts everything I know of your character. I have never taken anything that wasn't mine, Asenath replied steadily. Nor would I risk everything I value for material treasure. Then how do you explain this? He gestured to the golden scarab displayed on a linen cloth. I cannot accept to say someone must have placed it among my possessions. Vizier Imhotep, present as royal witness, stepped forward. Divine One, painful as it is to suggest, might Lady Asenath's humble origins explain such behavior? Perhaps the temptation of unlimited wealth proved too great for someone unaccustomed to royal privilege. Before Asenath could respond, the chamber door opened unexpectedly. Nefertari entered, ignoring protocol that forbade uninvited appearances. Forgive the intrusion, she said, bowing deeply. But I bring information relevant to these accusations. The pharaoh gestured for her to continue. Last night I observed unusual activity near the eastern storage chambers. Following discreetly, I witnessed a meeting between two figures. One I recognized as Meritatan, daughter of the high priest. Nefertari's voice remained calm, though her eyes betrayed tension. They exchanged something small and golden before separating. You accuse the high priest's daughter of theft. Imhotep's tone conveyed skepticism bordering on outrage. I accuse no one yet, Nefertari replied. I merely report what I saw. Why would you spy on palace activities after dark, countered Imhotep, unless you yourself had involvement? My reasons are my own, Nefertari answered coolly, though perhaps relevant is my growing concern about unusual alliances forming among certain court factions. The veiled accusation hung in the air. The pharaoh studied both women thoughtfully. This matter requires deeper investigation, he finally decided. Lady Asenath will remain under palace guard, but treated with all respect. Lady Nefertari's observations will be verified by questioning Meritatan. After both women departed, Asenath to guarded quarters, Nefertari to her own chambers, Imhotep remained with the pharaoh. Divine One, I fear Lady Nefertari's sudden support of her former rival seems suspiciously convenient. Perhaps they conspire together now. Or perhaps, Imhotep replied, the truth is more complex than we yet understand. That evening, as Asenath sat in her restricted quarters, an unexpected visitor arrived. Tani, the servant girl who had warned her about the poisoned chalice months earlier. "Mistress," she whispered after ensuring they weren't overheard, "there's something you should know. I was assigned to clean the vizier's private study yesterday. While there, I overheard him with the high priest, discussing how well their plan was proceeding, how the evidence against you was perfectly placed. Did they mention the treasure's actual location?" "No, mistress, but they spoke of Lady Nefertari as an unexpected complication, one they might need to address if she continued interfering." Meanwhile, Nefertari had begun her own investigation, utilizing networks of servants and confidants still loyal to her family. By midnight, she had compiled enough concerning information to risk another protocol breach. Using secret passages known to few, she made her way to Asenath's guarded quarters. The single guard was easily distracted by a commotion arranged down the corridor. "We have little time," she told the surprised Asenath. "I've discovered disturbing connections. The missing treasures are merely pretext. Imhotep plans to depose Amenhotep, claiming his illness left him unfit to rule. That's treason of the highest order." "Precisely. And you, as his chosen queen and the symbol of his questionable judgment, are the perfect scapegoat. We must warn him immediately." Nefertari shook her head. "The palace is watched too carefully. Any attempt to reach the pharaoh would alert Imhotep's conspirators." "Then what do you suggest?" "I have loyal guards among my father's men. They've discovered unusual activity in the abandoned temple storerooms, possibly where the treasures are hidden. If we recover them ourselves, we expose the plot," Asenath finished, "and clear my name simultaneously." "Exactly." Nefertari produced a small object wrapped in linen, a dagger with an ivory handle. "Can you use this if necessary?" Asenath took the weapon hesitantly. "I've never harmed anyone." "Pray you won't need to start now," Nefertari replied grimly. "But these conspirators won't surrender power willingly." As they prepared to slip away through the servant passages, Asenath paused. "Why help me? Your alliance with Imhotep could restore your position. Perhaps I've discovered that honor once sacrificed cannot be reclaimed," Nefertari answered with unexpected vulnerability. "Or perhaps I simply prefer an honest rival to dishonest allies." The abandoned temple storerooms lay beneath the palace's eastern wing, accessible only through narrow passages designed to protect sacred objects from tomb robbers. Guided by Nefertari's knowledge of palace architecture, the two women navigated the labyrinthine corridors by lamplight. "How did you discover these passages?" Asenath whispered, as they descended worn stone steps. "My grandfather was royal architect under Pharaoh Thutmose," Nefertari replied. "He shared certain secrets with my father, who shared them with me." They reached a heavy wooden door reinforced with bronze. Voices murmured beyond it, conspirators unaware of approaching justice. "We should verify the treasure's presence before confronting anyone," Asenath suggested. Nefertari nodded, pointing to a small observation grate above the door. "Can you see anything if I boost you up?" With some effort, Asenath peered through the grate. Inside, she could make out 5 figures surrounding what appeared to be the missing treasures: golden statues, ceremonial weapons, and jewelry laid out on linen cloths. "The vizier is there," she whispered, "with the high priest and 3 others I don't recognize, military commanders." Nefertari guessed. "We need evidence of their treasonous intent." "Can you hear what they're saying?" Asenath strained to catch fragments of conversation. "Imhotep speaks of tomorrow's announcement, something about the pharaoh's diminished capacity following illness. The final phase of their coup," Nefertari concluded grimly. "They'll declare Imhotep unfit to rule, using the theft as evidence of disorder under his leadership." "We need help," Asenath decided. "This is beyond what 2 women can handle alone, regardless of our determination. My father's guards are positioned near the east gate. If one of us could reach them." A sudden noise from behind interrupted their planning, footsteps approaching along the passage they had just traversed. They were trapped between the conspirators and unknown newcomers. "In here," Nefertari hissed, pulling Asenath into a small alcove, originally designed for offering statues. "Don't breathe." Two guards passed, clearly searching for something or someone. Their presence confirmed the women's fears. Their absence had been discovered, alerting the conspirators. Once the guards moved beyond their hiding place, Nefertari made a swift decision. "I'll create a diversion. You run for help." "That's too dangerous," Asenath protested. "I'm faster," Nefertari stated practically. "And you're more convincing. The Pharaoh trusts you implicitly." Before Asenath could argue further, Nefertari darted from their hiding place, deliberately making enough noise to attract the guards' attention. As predicted, they immediately gave chase, leaving the passage to the east gate momentarily clear. Asenath hesitated only briefly before racing toward potential aid. She reached the gate guards breathless, but determined, quickly explaining the situation to the captain, loyal to Lord Imminamhat. "Treason is a serious accusation, my lady," the captain replied cautiously. "I've seen the stolen treasures with my own eyes," she insisted, "and Lady Nefertari has placed herself in grave danger to expose this plot. Would she risk her life for a false accusation?" That argument proved persuasive. The captain dispatched runners to alert the Pharaoh, while mobilizing his men to secure the storage rooms. Meanwhile, Nefertari's diversion had evolved into outright capture. Brought before Imhotep in the treasure room, she faced her accusers with defiant dignity. "How convenient," the vizier observed coldly. "The former favorite and the current one, both implicated in theft. The Pharaoh will have no choice but to recognize his poor judgment in matters of trust." "Your plot is transparent, Imhotep," Nefertari replied. "Using sacred treasures as political tools, the gods will not look kindly on such sacrilege." The high priest stepped forward, anger distorting his features. "Do not presume to interpret divine will, girl. Egypt requires traditional leadership, not the whims of a lovesick king and his common-born favorite. And you believe yourself better qualified to determine Egypt's needs." A new voice rang through the chamber as Pharaoh Amenhotep himself entered, flanked by royal guards with weapons drawn. Behind him stood Asenath, her expression reflecting not triumph, but sadness at the confirmation of such betrayal. What followed was both justice and mercy, hallmarks of Amenhotep's rule. The conspirators were arrested, the treasures recovered. In the public judgment that followed days later, Imhotep and the high priest faced the consequences of their treason. "You have betrayed not only your king but Egypt itself," Amenhotep declared before the assembled court. "Yet your years of service before this corruption took hold cannot be forgotten. Rather than execution, the traditional punishment for treason, the conspirators were exiled to distant oasis outposts, stripped of titles and property, but permitted to live in contemplation of their failures. 1 month later, as originally planned, Asenath became Egypt's queen in a ceremony that combined traditional splendor with innovations reflecting her practical nature. Resources that might have been spent on excessive display were instead directed toward expanding irrigation systems and medical facilities. Among the honored guests stood Nefertari, no longer adversary, but trusted royal advisor. Her experience, connections, and political acumen complemented Asenath's practical wisdom, creating a partnership that would guide Egypt through subsequent challenges. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when you shouted, 'Choose me' at that selection ceremony?" Asenath asked her during a quiet moment amid the coronation festivities. "That I would help place my rival on the throne, then serve as her advisor." Nefertari laughed softly. "The gods have interesting senses of humor. Perhaps they simply recognize that different strengths serve different purposes," Asenath suggested. "Beauty and ambition have their place, as do wisdom and compassion." Together, they gazed across the celebration, where Egyptians from all walks of life, nobles and commoners alike, shared in the kingdom's renewed prosperity. The drought had ended, the sickness past, the conspiracy defeated. What remained was opportunity to build something stronger and more balanced than what had come before. To Egypt, eternal, Nefertari offered, raising her wine cup in the traditional toast. To Egypt renewed, Asenath amended gently, touching her cup to her friends, above them carved into ancient stone. The double crown of unified Egypt watched over their unprecedented alliance, a symbol of how apparent opposites, when properly balanced, create harmony more powerful than either could achieve alone.